Hey, you. Have you ever wondered how terrible can get? Ever had a passing thought of drag racing pure garbage? Do you just have too much of that pesky stuff called time on your hands? Then, congrats. I feel your misery, your pain, your suffering. Because today, we're going to be comparing this $8 netbook against this thing, which, how much was it again? Alright, free. Taking a look at our setup, we've got a 90nm S3 core VIA C7 running at 1 GHz. It's got 128K of L2 cache, which is a fair bit more than VIA's previous offerings, and even SSD 3 support on top of that. Our motherboard is the Jetway P4MBM SR2-VC with a VIA CN700 chipset. It supports at most a gig of RAM, which, ignoring the mode because it is only one slot, is populated with a single stick of DDR2-667, though the system is only able to clock at 266 MHz instead of the rated 333. Lastly, we're using the S3 UniChrome Pro IGP running at 200 MHz, which sits on an internal AGP 8X bus and uses 64 MB of shared memory. Moving on to benchmarks, I'm going to be using the inbuilt benchmark of Hardware Info 32, and we're skipping the disk drive benchmark because that's not really going to matter. I'm leaving it on multi-threaded as well because there's only a single core here. It's really not going to matter much, if at all. And as you can see here, we get 6,273 points on our CPU benchmark, 2,883 in our FPU, and 458 megabytes per second on our memory transfer speeds. I'm just gonna save these results real quick, and we'll move on to the next thing. And as far as OpenGL support goes, GL Info reports hardware OpenGL 1.2 support. However, supported does not necessarily mean that's supported well, as we'll see in a moment with WGL gears. And immediately we can see the rendering errors that are involved in running GLX gears. So despite getting pretty decent FPS considering, the absolute terribleness of the hardware, pausing the rendering by right-clicking here shows just how badly rendered the gears actually are. If this wasn't a sign for what was to come next, then I don't know what is. Moving on to 3D Mark 2001 SE, for reasons called turns out the netbook can't use the same 3D Mark settings as the C7 board, I'll be opting to use the following settings: 640x480 with 16-bit color, no AA, double frame buffer, compressed textures, and a 24-bit Z buffer. You may also notice that under rendering pipeline it says D3D software TNL. This is because on the S3 UniChrome Pro, hardware accelerated transform and lighting is not supported. So anyway, let's just get on with the benchmark. there you have it, 1059 3D marks. As you'll see in a bit, it is not good. Taking a look at Half-Life now, we can see that we have our FPS counter down there, and our video or graphics renderer will be Direct3D at 640 by 480. So, well, and 16-bit color as well. So, without further ado, let's just hop into the opening sequence.
Good morning, and welcome to the Black Mesa Transit System. This automated train is provided for the security and convenience of the Black Mesa Research Facility personnel. The time is 8:47 a.m. Current topside temperature is 93 degrees, with an estimated high of 105. The Black Mesa compound is maintained at a pleasant 68 degrees at all times. This train is inbound from Level 3 dormitories to Sector C test labs and control facilities. If your intended destination is a high security area beyond Sector C, you will need to return to the Central Transit Hub in Area 9 and board a high security train. If you have not yet submitted your identity to the retinal clearance system, you must report to Black Mesa personnel for processing before you will be permitted into the high security branch of the transit system. Due to the high toxicity of material routinely handled in the Black Mesa compound, no smoking, eating, or drinking are permitted within the Black Mesa transit system. Please keep your limbs inside the train at all times. Do not attempt to open the doors until the train has come to a complete halt at the station platform. In the event of an emergency, passengers are to remain seated and await further instruction. If it is necessary to exit the train, disabled personnel should be evacuated first. Please stay away from electrified rails and proceed to an emergency station until assistance arrives. Decathlon will commence this evening at 1900 hours in the Level 3 facility. The semi-finals for high security personnel will be announced in a separate secure access transmission. Remember, more lives than your own may depend on your fitness. Do you have a friend or relative who would make a valuable addition to the Black Mesa team? Immediate openings are available in the areas of materials handling and low clearance security. Please contact Black Mesa personnel for further information. If you are associated with areas of physics, biotechnology, or other high-tech fields, please contact our civilian recruitment. The Black Mesa Research Facility is an equal opportunity. A reminder to all Black Mesa personnel. Regular radiation and biohazard screenings are a requirement of continued employment in the Black Mesa Research Facility. Missing a scheduled urinalysis or radiation checkup is grounds for immediate termination. If you feel you have been exposed to radioactive or other hazardous materials in the course of your duties, contact your radiation safety officer immediately. Work safe. Work smart. Your future depends on it. Now arriving at Sector C test labs and control facilities. Please stand back from the
So, all in all, it's not that terrible of an experience. You can see that our frame rate hovers around the mid-teens most of the time once we've, left, well, not really left, but stopped the intro sequence. The game is responsive, which is a good thing, and I didn't fall out of the tram like in some of the other tests that I've done before, so I guess that's also a good thing, but I would still much prefer something that's a little bit smoother than this experience if I were to play this. So, let's just move on to the netbook before I lose even more of my sanity. But before we do that, it's time for some Minecraft. Moving on to ClassiCube in Direct 3D mode on the VIA C7, we can see there's not really anything to change in the options that I just showed you. And, well, it does pretty decently. You can see the settings there. And yeah, we get around 30 FPS most of the time, though it does drop if you look into things that are like far across the map from you. But even in more complex scenes such as here where there's a lot of trees, we don't see that big of a drop. And in water, you can see that the alpha effects are working just fine, so the water is nice and transparent. And with how little geometry there is right now, we can actually even hit 60 FPS on the S3 UniChrome graphics. And once again, if I turn this way, it drops dramatically, because I'm pretty sure that it's just the game is just trying to load everything in the distance, since this is a version that does not have infinite maps, and so everything's just loaded in at once. If you look in this direction, it's gonna load everything, and I guess there's no block face culling or anything, I guess. And well, yeah, decent performance, not much else to say about it. The OpenGL version of ClassiCube, however, does have a little bit more jankiness. You can notice that it says OpenGL 1.1 there, despite the hardware supporting 1.2. And I think that might be because it maybe is able to detect the supported feature set, but I'm not really sure. Either way, you can immediately see that it fails to render anything at all. It's just completely white, except for the heads-up display. And even then, the FPS is not very good anyway, so not only is performance terrible in OpenGL, well, we are suddenly above 20 FPS, but not only is performance generally terrible, but also just, it's broken. You cannot see a thing. And now moving on to actual Minecraft. Here we'll be using Betacraft, version classic 0.0.12a-dev, which is equivalent to 0.0.0.11 in the launcher, I think. It says right there. And yeah, you can probably tell that this is voiceover because it turns out that the mic that I am using directly in video is not good. Either way, you're about to see just how ravaged the OpenGL rendering is in actual regular Minecraft. So give it a moment while it generates the world. And nothing. So it turns out that alongside the other weirdness involved with the UniChrome graphics, there's another quirk about it, and it's that if you open up ClassiCube OpenGL mode and find that it does not render anything, then it will not render anything from then on in OpenGL until you restart the computer. So that's what I'm doing right here. I'm just restarting the system, so give it a moment. There's the Windows XP shutdown sound. And I'll just skip ahead. And here we are, one restart later, and we're back in business. So, yeah, give it a moment. And there we go. The most badly ravaged rendering that I've ever seen. And yeah, every single block is completely broken. You can see individual triangles being attempted to be rendered with each block, and there's no textures whatsoever except for that one block up in the corner showing what's currently selected. And instead it's all just basic colors. You can also see the cave systems down below, so it's probably dropping performance even more because it's trying to render what's below ground now as well. And even looking up into the sky, I can't even hit double-digit FPS, so there's just something wrong with the OpenGL rendering engine in this thing, and I don't know what it is. But given how it's S3 graphics, I wouldn't be surprised if it was just awful driver quality. So I'm just gonna move on to the next thing. Next up, we're gonna select beta 1.7.3 because in general that tends to be one of the go-to versions of Minecraft as far as compatibility goes. But, well, you're about to see, once again, compatibility, at least with other graphics processors, does not necessarily mean that it's going to play nice with the UniChrome. And yeah, there you got it. Once again, everything's broken. I've already pre-generated a world ahead of time just so then we're not sitting here for hours, because it did legitimately take like half an hour. And yeah, it's a little bit better this time, but performance is not even close to what it was in Classic, and by that I mean that's hardly even a single frame per second. But at the very least, the blocks are solid now. Mostly. That shimmering stuff in the background that you just saw there, that is supposed to be water, but I think the animated textures being broken as they are probably loaded in the no texture, I guess. And that's being animated instead, I guess. I don't know, there's just so much weirdness going on with this, and once again, just like the previous thing, this video has gone on for way longer than I thought it was going to, so yeah, let's just close that. And one more thing, Minecraft 1.13. So for this, we're going to be using something called MSA Legacy, which turns out to be a patch for the old 1.6 era launcher for Minecraft, and this allows you to log in with a Microsoft account. So give it a moment while it opens. Wait for it. Wait for it. Give it some time. It's thinking. But yeah, this was the old Minecraft launcher before the whole like native launchers stuff started going around. So this is what you used to use to start the game. Oh, I gotta censor that. So this is the launcher that you used to use to start Minecraft if you were playing the game before, I forget, I think it was like 2018, 2019 when the native launchers started making rounds. But yeah, it's kind of broken in that you can't see the update stuff in the update notes tab anymore, but everything else works. You can actually even launch 1.19.4 from it, but I'm not going to try on this just because it's not even close to supporting the OpenGL 3.2 that requires. But yeah, Minecraft 1.13 is the last version of Minecraft, to my knowledge at least, that can launch on OpenGL 1.2 devices. Though, from what I've heard, there is some amount of workaround that can be done for, I think, Minecraft 1.14 that allows you to still use OpenGL 1.2 just by overriding the OpenGL version string. But this is just vanilla Minecraft. I'm not doing any version overriding. The only patching that I'm doing is to the launcher itself. So we'll just let this run for a bit, and I'll cut back to you when Minecraft 1.13 actually is launched. Almost there. And there we go. It is screaming in agony, apparently. And you know what? Me too, Minecraft. Me too. And yeah, you can already tell from the frame rate that the title screen is moving at that this is not a good experience. I'm not even going to try loading into a world at this point, because from prior testing, it'll just crash instantly after letting you sit and wait for almost a full hour trying to load a world. And now, with the VIA C7 stuff out of the way, let's move on to the netbook stuff. Moving on to hardware info 32, we can see that we have an Intel Atom N455, which has 2 cores clocked at 1.6 GHz at most each, and 512 kilobytes of L2 cache. Our motherboard is the HP 1584, which is really just the HP Mini 1103's motherboard, paired with 1 stick running in single channel of DDR3 1333, which is just a single gig of RAM, which is plenty enough for XP in most cases. And our graphics is the Intel GMA 3150, also known as the graphics processor of the Intel Pineview M platform. Moving on to a brief round of CPU benchmarks, you'll notice that I did switch from an SD card to a hard drive there with the Apple HDD stuff. Give it a moment. And there we go. We get about 16,000 points on our CPU benchmark and 1,776 megabytes per second on our memory transfer speeds. Moving on to GL info now, we can see that we have a reported compatibility with OpenGL 1.4 from the Intel Pineview platform drivers. And if we open up WGL Gears here, give it a moment, then we can already see that it is far better than the C7's UniChrome graphics as far as rendering goes. And not only that, but it's actually pretty snappy as well, getting well over 1000 FPS despite being, the graphics of a netbook. Firing up 3D Mark 2001 SE now, we can see that we're using the same settings for every test. But now we are going to be using the Intel GMA 3150 instead. So yeah, now that I've changed the resolution over, we've got everything the same here. You'll also notice that it's got D3D software TNL there, because this also does not have hardware TNL. There we go, 3,168 3D marks. That's about 3 times, give or take a little bit, higher than the score of what the UniChrome was able to score with the VSC7 board. And yeah, this is a netbook. Alrighty, and we're back in Half-Life now. You already know the deal. FPS counter there. We've got the settings, blah blah blah. So let's just go ahead and start the game.
Good morning, and welcome to the Black Mesa Transit System. This automated train is provided for the security and convenience of the Black Mesa Research Facility personnel. The time is 8:47 a.m. Current topside temperature is 93 degrees, with an estimated high of 105. The Black Mesa compound is maintained at a pleasant 68 degrees at all times. This train is inbound from Level 3 dormitories to Sector C test labs and control facilities. If your intended destination is a high security area beyond Sector C, you will need to return to the central transit hub in Area 9 and board a high security train. If you have not yet submitted your identity to the retinal clearance system, you must report to Black Mesa personnel for processing before you will be permitted into the high security branch of the transit system. Due to the high toxicity of material routinely handled in the Black Mesa compound, no smoking, eating, or drinking are permitted within the Black Mesa transit system. Please keep your limbs inside the train at all times. Do not attempt to open the doors until the train has come to a complete halt at the station platform. In the event of an emergency, passengers are to remain seated and await further instruction. If it is necessary to exit the train, disabled personnel should be evacuated first. Please stay away from electrified rails and proceed to an emergency station until assistance arrives. Mesa Hazard Course Decathlon will commence this evening at 1900 hours in the Level 3 facility. The semi-finals for high security personnel will be announced in a separate secure access transmission. Remember, more lives than your own may depend on your fitness. Do you have a friend or relative who would make a valuable addition to the Black Mesa team? Immediate openings are available in the areas of materials handling and low clearance security. Please contact Black Mesa personnel for further information. If you have an associate with a background in the areas of theoretical physics, biotechnology, or other high-tech disciplines, please contact our civilian recruitment division. The Black Mesa Research Facility is an equal opportunity employer. reminder to all Black Mesa personnel. Regular radiation and biohazard screenings are a requirement of continued employment in the Black Mesa Research Facility. Missing a scheduled urinalysis or radiation checkup is grounds for immediate termination. If you feel you have been exposed to radioactive or other hazardous materials in the course of your duties, contact your radiation safety officer immediately. Work safe. Work smart. Your future depends on it. Now arriving at Sector C test labs and control facilities.
Interestingly, in Direct 3D mode at least,
Please
the Intel integrated graphics perform about on par with the S3 UniChrome graphics, also hovering just around 15 or so FPS. So I will note that from pre-testing, it blows it out of the water in OpenGL mode, so I think it's mostly just up to, I guess, the game being better in OpenGL for this particular graphics processor compared to Direct 3D. So yeah, I'll move on to Minecraft, I guess. Up next, we've got ClassiCube again. So we're back on the netbook, and yeah, we're just gonna fire up the Direct 3D version of ClassiCube. So loading into the game, we can immediately see that despite being on the same settings as before, we are getting a much higher FPS. Though the same problem with FPS dropping as we look to somewhere else that has a lot more terrain does still apply. So, but yeah, we're peaking above 100 FPS here, like far above in many cases. And then as we start looking at terrain that's got a little bit more stuff to it, like yeah, here in the distance, we can definitely see a drop there with the FPS almost dropping to half of what it was before, if not more. And then looking back over here, we're back into the hundreds. And yeah, I don't really have all that much more to say about this. So let's just close out of this, and in a single shot, let's just keep on going. So now I've got ClassiCube OpenGL, and I will mention, you can see that message already, it does apparently complain about Intel integrated graphics, though at least these GMA graphics that I'm using in this netbook here don't really pose much of an issue. So yeah, same settings and also the same issues as far as looking at a direction that has more terrain in it compared to areas with less terrain. Now, originally in this recording I was talking about how the FPS seemed to be lower than I thought it was going to be, especially given how I mentioned in the past that OpenGL does work quite well on GMA compared to Direct 3D. And, well, yeah, it just turned out that I was not really looking in a direction that works, I guess? I don't know. And, yeah, that's a pretty steep drop there. This is the first time that I've done so much voiceover. Anyway, let's drop out of that, and we'll move on to the next thing. So, close that. And now we're going to be opening up Betacraft, and we will be taking a look at version 0.0.12a-dev, which is 0.0.11a in the official Minecraft launcher, but whatever, that doesn't matter. Also, you might have noticed that it said failed to update news. That's because I did not bother to connect this thing to the internet this time. So, yeah. Immediately, you can see it actually renders stuff. it is not broken at all, but it is laggy, and it is very, very laggy. So I think this is more of an issue with Minecraft itself rather than the graphics processor in this case, because as you'll see in a bit, once I load up beta, performance does go up a lot. So yeah, you can see a Steve running over there, so that's kind of neat. But as far as everything else goes, there's not really anything particularly interesting going on here. I'm just running around, and we don't really see very many instances where frame rate goes above 10 FPS. Actually, you know what? Scratch that. We're hitting 20 something FPS all of a sudden, and that is because we are now at the edge of the map. So same thing applies here as before. If you're close to the edge of the map and looking outwards, then you're going to get higher FPS because there's less terrain being loaded in. Well, loaded into view. So yeah, you saw 100 something FPS there, and again, and it immediately tanks when I turn around. So yeah, so closing out of that, and we're gonna open up Betacraft again, and this time we're gonna be moving on over to beta 1.7.3, which is definitely gonna be one of the more optimized versions of Minecraft by then, and from what I've seen, tends to be the version to play as far as beta goes. So yeah, we're here in the title screen, and we're just going to load into a world. Now this is a world that was generated previously. It's actually the same world that was on the VSC7, because I just made a direct drive clone of the SD card over to here. But yeah, shot for shot, this was what I was looking at on the VSC7 board, and you can see the FPS counter there is kind of polluting the screen in a sense. It's taking up a lot of space, to say the least. You can see the video settings there slowly being eaten up by the graph, but render distance normal, fancy graphics, we've got all that other stuff, and yeah, I just close out of that so that it is actually, you know, watchable. And while it is noticeably laggy, and I would not want to play with this kind of frame rate, it is still far better than it was in that version of Minecraft Classic that I loaded into just like a couple of minutes ago. So yeah, just wading through the water here. You can see moments where the FPS hits something maybe in the low 20s, but most of the time it's gonna be single digits here. And last but not least, we've got 1.13 yet again. So yeah, it's a lot of waiting, but you can see that it does actually load up properly. It does not scream in pain, though it does still complain about OpenGL. And this time around, I'm going to show you the settings beforehand. Everything is completely stock. Normal render distance is now 8 chunks. And yeah, there's the rest of everything. Just going to click done now. And we're going to load into a world. So on the C7, it does, I think I mentioned before, it does crash immediately upon loading into the world, but that does mean that it did pre-generate a world already, so we're just gonna load into that and let the waiting game commence. And there we go. Finally loaded into the world. So, I think it's pretty obvious already that performance is not good, to say the least. We're getting, I'd say, sub 1 FPS most of the time, though there are moments where you do see maybe 2, possibly even 3 FPS. Now, of course, this is on, 8 chunk render distance with fancy graphics on the integrated graphics of an Intel Atom, so it's not like you're really supposed to see anything particularly good in this case, but it's still, I guess, infinitely better than the UniChrome graphics of the VIA C7 board, I guess, because, launching and loading into a world at all is better than crashing on world load. So, yeah, there's really not that much more to show for this, aside from, just walking around showing that, hey, the game is actually playing, and stuff like that. So, yeah. Even the window is closing slowly. That's how hard it's lagging. But, yeah. I was originally going to have some web browsing comparisons between these two systems, though at this point, I think this video has gotten long enough, so yeah, time to roll the new outro, I guess. Hey, you made it to the end of the video. Why not check out that subscribe button while I try and get my hand tracking to work for once, or better yet, why not join as a channel patron? $1 a month gets you a shout out and access to the secret crab loft in my Discord, if I can point below. Okay, I guess I'm not going to point. Linked in the description, and $5 a month gets you bonus content on top of that, including unedited video footage and early access to some of the other stuff that I make. Sometimes I question my life choices.